My name is Clarice, and I'm 58 years old. When the investor looked at my cousin and asked, "Who owns the patent?" I knew his lie had finally caught up with him. For most of my life, I've been a chemistry teacher, the kind who stayed late after class helping students with lab work, who spent weekends experimenting with harmless compounds, who found joy in small, tidy discoveries. When I retired 3 years ago, I thought my life would slow down. Garden work, quiet mornings, maybe finally building that little retirement cottage I'd been dreaming about. I never imagined that the thing that would shake up my peaceful life wouldn't be science, but family. My cousin Eli was the type of man who walked into a room and instantly filled it. He was my late sister's boy, 12 years younger than me, and he'd always had that silver-tongued confidence that made people lean in when he talked. The kind who could sell ice in a snowstorm. The kind I used to admire. Until I learned admiration can turn into blindness if you're not careful. I hadn't seen him in almost 5 years when he suddenly called me out of the blue. "Clarice, my favorite scientist. Guess who's about to change the world?" His voice still had that contagious energy. He told me he was developing a biodegradable packaging startup, a product that would replace plastic containers with something eco-friendly, affordable, and sustainable. I remember smiling into the phone, genuinely proud that he was doing something meaningful. He said he'd been thinking about me, about how brilliant I was with formulas, and how the adhesive compound I once tinkered with for fun could be the missing piece for his new innovation. He made it sound like destiny, like my years of experimenting in my small garage lab had led to this very moment. I still had that old formula tucked away in my notebooks. An eco-friendly adhesive I developed during my teaching years. Just an independent passion project. It worked beautifully for paper and cellulose, but I never pursued commercialization. It was my little creation, a quiet triumph that no one cared much about. Until Eli brought it up. He said, "Aunt Clarice, imagine this. Your formula on the market, in every home, saving the planet. You'd be my technical lead. Well, unofficially, just a silent partner. I need someone I can trust, not just investors who only see dollar signs." He painted the dream vividly. Conferences, environmental awards, recognition. He said, "You'll finally get the credit you deserve, Clarice. You've spent your life giving others tools to succeed. Now it's your turn." I should have known better. But I'd be lying if I said those words didn't touch me. For years, I'd been overlooked. My husband passed away a decade ago. I had no children, and my friends had drifted into their own lives. It felt nice to be needed, to be seen. So I met with him several times, at cafes, in his rented workspace, over endless cups of coffee. He showed me glossy sketches and mock-ups of eco-containers, saying how my adhesive would be the heart of it. He told me he had potential investors waiting, but he needed funding to finalize the prototype before the big pitch. When I asked about his progress, he always smiled, that confident, charming grin. "Everything's falling into place, Clarice. You're helping me build something bigger than both of us." Then came the talk of money. He said he needed a bridge fund, $76,000, to cover materials, lab rental, and design costs before the investor presentation. I hesitated. That money was supposed to go toward my cottage in Maine, the one I'd been planning, a quiet retreat near the lake. But Eli was family who looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll get it all back, tenfold. You're not just investing in me, you're investing in your own legacy." Those words, my own legacy, they hooked me. Maybe I wanted to believe him. A week later, I transferred the money. He promised me receipts, equity documents, and a formal partnership contract once the prototype's done. He said legalities could wait until after the investor meeting. I didn't push. I didn't want to seem distrustful. Days turned into weeks. Eli became harder to reach. "Busy," he'd text. "Testing the adhesive batch. Meeting with designers." Every now and then, he'd send a photo. A jar of something that looked suspiciously like my formula, or a half-finished container with a sleek logo. EcoShell Industry. Something in my stomach started to twist, but I told myself not to be paranoid. Family doesn't betray family, right? By the time he finally called me again, nearly a month later, I'd almost convinced myself everything was fine. But his voice wasn't the same. It was tight, rushed, anxious. "Clarice," he said, "we've got a problem. The investor meeting's tomorrow morning, and I need you to come. Please, it's complicated." My heart dropped. "Eli, what's going on?" He hesitated for a long beat before saying, "Just trust me, okay? It's important. I'll explain everything when you get here." The line went dead. And that's when it hit me. The uneasy realization that my retirement savings, my invention, and my trust might all be tangled in something much darker than I ever imagined. What could possibly go wrong before the biggest investor meeting of his career? And my investment. The next morning, I arrived early at the conference center where the investor presentation was being held. It was one of those modern buildings with glass walls and polished marble floors that made every sound echo. My palms were sweaty, my stomach in knots. I kept telling myself this was just nerves, excitement maybe. After all, Eli had said this was the big day, the one that would secure funding and set us both on the map. When I walked into the event hall, I saw Eli standing near the stage in a crisp navy suit. He looked so sure of himself, so completely in control, laughing with a group of sharply dressed investors. He didn't notice me at first, and for a second I wondered if I even belonged there. I'd expected to be introduced as his technical co-founder, the scientific mind behind the product, but there was no name tag waiting for me, only a printed agenda that read Echo Shell Industries, presented by Eli Langford, founder and CEO. A small chill ran through me, but I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was just a formatting mistake. Maybe he'd introduce me later, on stage. I sat quietly in the second row, clutching my small notebook, the one filled with handwritten notes and formulas that had started this entire venture. When the lights dimmed and the projector screen lit up, Eli took the stage with effortless charisma. His voice was smooth, his smile confident. He began by talking about pollution, the crisis of plastic waste, and the global need for sustainable alternatives. Then he moved into the solution, his solution. The screen displayed a high-resolution image of my adhesive sample, perfectly photographed, labeled with a sleek caption, EcoBond TM, a proprietary formula developed by Eli Langford. For a moment, I thought I'd misread it. My formula, the one I'd spent years perfecting in my garage lab, was now being called his proprietary development. He kept going, showing diagrams of chemical structures I recognized immediately. My work, my ratios, even my handwriting, copied from the old charts I'd shared with him, now sitting under his company logo. He never mentioned me, not once. My breath caught in my throat as I looked around. The investors nodded approvingly, impressed. They didn't know they were applauding a lie. When he demonstrated how the adhesive worked, people leaned forward in. He used my own description of its molecular reaction, and word for word, as if it had come from his hands started trembling. I wanted to stand up, to shout that he was stealing from me, but I couldn't move. I felt trapped between pride and horror, watching someone else take ownership of everything I had built. After the applause, the Q&A began. That's when one of the investors, a sharp, older man with silver hair and an analytical tone, asked, "This adhesive compound is fascinating, Mr. Langford. Who currently owns the patent rights?" For the first time, Eli faltered. His smile twitched. He glanced at me, quick, almost imperceptible, and then said, "Our team has that covered. We're in the process of securing exclusive rights." The investor's brow furrowed. "Could we verify that, perhaps through the registry?" Eli chuckled nervously. Of course. Everything's being finalized. Legal paperwork always lags behind innovation. You know how it is." The man didn't smile back. The air in the room shifted. I could feel the tension crawling between the rows of investors, that faint scent of distrust that money people recognize instantly. The presentation wrapped up soon after, but I couldn't hear the applause anymore. My ears were ringing. I felt sick. I had just witnessed my own erasure, live, on stage, in front of strangers. When the crowd began mingling, Eli came over, his grin forced now. "Clarice, you made it. What did you think?" I stared at him, my voice low but shaking. "What was that, Eli? Why didn't you mention me? You presented my work as your own." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't overreact, Clarice. You're family. This is how startups work. I'm just streamlining the message. Investors don't need to know every detail right now. Once the deal's sealed, we'll get you listed as a contributor." "A contributor?" I repeated, stunned. "I'm the inventor." He sighed, looking impatient. And I'm the one building the company. We both play our parts. Look, paperwork is being drafted. You'll get your share when the time's right. Trust me. Trust him." Those 2 words sounded poisonous now. He patted my shoulder like I was a naive child, then turned to greet another investor, leaving me standing there in the middle of the room, invisible. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My mind replayed every promise he'd made, every word about partnership, trust, legacy. I thought about the $76 I'd sent him, about the formula he now called his own, about how easily he had replaced me with a company logo. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the realization hit like a cold wave. I hadn't invested in a dream. I had financed a theft. What if Eli's startup succeeds? And I'm erased completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eli standing on that stage. My diagrams on his slides, my formulas under his name. The applause echoed in my head like a cruel reminder of how easily trust can be weaponized. By 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to my study. I pulled out my old patent folders, flipping through the pages until I found what I was looking for: the registration for my eco-adhesive compound. It had been filed under my name 10 years ago, back when I was still teaching full-time. I had never renewed it for commercial use, but the ownership was still legally mine. Out of curiosity, and maybe dread, I opened my laptop and searched the National Patent Database, typing in the chemical formula number. There it was, still listed under Clarice Whitmore, unlicensed, untouched, no mentions of any transfers or joint filings. I froze. That could only mean one thing. Eli had never even filed for permission to use it. He had presented my work as his own, completely unregistered, completely unauthorized. I leaned back in my chair, my hands trembling over the keyboard. The betrayal felt heavier now, realer, like something physical pressing on my chest. I replayed every conversation in my mind. His flattery, his reassurances, the way he called me the real genius. Every compliment had been bait. Every promise, a setup. He hadn't needed me. He had needed my work. I grabbed my phone and called him, once, twice, 3 times, straight to voicemail. I texted him, my messages growing shorter and angrier with each send. Clarice. Eli, we need to talk. Clarice. I checked the patent database. What did you do? Clarice. You need to call me back now. Hours passed. Nothing. By morning, I decided I wasn't waiting anymore. I drove across town to the address he'd mentioned for his startup, a shared co-working space filled with glass offices and young entrepreneurs hunched over laptops. When I walked in, I saw his company's name on the door in neat vinyl letters, Echo Shell Industries. The logo looked sleek and professional, as if it had been there for months. But Eli wasn't. A young woman sat behind a small reception desk, nervously glancing at her computer screen when I asked, "Is Eli Langford here?" She hesitated. "He's not in right now." "Do you know when he'll be back?" I pressed. She bit her lip, then whispered quietly, "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but he's been telling everyone the adhesive patent already belongs to him. He said it was transferred from a retired teacher, that you were just helping with the funding." Her words hit me like a slap. "That's a lie," I said firmly. She nodded slightly. "I thought so. He's not exactly honest with everyone." I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Can I see the prototype he's been working on?" She hesitated again, glancing toward the hallway. "He told us not to show anyone, but—" She opened a storage cabinet and pulled out a few small samples. Biodegradable containers sealed with an amber-colored adhesive I'd recognize anywhere. My formula, exactly as I had created it. I picked one up, turning it under the light. The color, the texture, even the faint citrus scent I'd added to mask the organic acids. It was unmistakable. He hadn't altered a thing. Anger burned through me, hot and clean. I wanted to storm out, to call him and scream, to tell every investor what he'd done. But the rational part of me, the scientist in me, whispered, "Not yet. You need proof." I thanked the assistant quietly and left, clutching one of the sample jars she'd let me borrow. That night, I turned my dining table into a crime scene. Every text message, every email, every wire transfer, I documented it all. I took photos of the product samples, of my handwritten notes that matched his presentation slides. I organized them into digital folders, labeling everything carefully. If he wanted to play CEO, I would play strategist. I needed scientific confirmation, something undeniable. That's when I remembered Dr. Simone Keller, an old friend from my teaching days. Simone was now a chemistry professor at the university. Brilliant, ethical, meticulous. The kind of woman who could turn evidence into truth. I called her first thing in the morning. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Clarice, it's been years." "I know," I said softly. "Simone, I need your help. Someone stole one of my formulas, my eco-adhesive, and they're claiming it as theirs." There was a pause on the line. Then, calmly, she said, "Bring me the samples. If it's yours, we'll prove it." Something inside me steadied at her confidence. When I hung up, I felt the first flicker of clarity since this all began. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't a victim. Not yet. I still had the truth on my side, and I still had the tools to expose him. I looked at the jar on my table, my formula, my years of work, the symbol of every hour I'd spent believing in something good, and whispered to myself, "You can take my money, Eli, but you won't take my name." That night, as I labeled my evidence folders one by one, I made a vow. I may have lost $76,000, but I would not lose my identity. Simone's test results could either confirm my suspicion or destroy my last bit of faith in myself. That night, I couldn't shut my mind off. The applause from that presentation kept looping in my head, but this time it sounded hollow, like clapping in an empty room. By 1:30 a.m., I was pacing my study. Finally, I sat down, switched on my desk lamp, and started digging through the old accordion file where I kept every patent I'd ever registered. My eco-adhesive was in there, numbered, signed, dated 10 years ago under my full name, Clarice Whitmore. I still remembered the thrill of getting that certificate in the mail. I opened the National Patent Database on my laptop, typed in the compound number, and waited. When the listing appeared, my breath caught. The record was still under my name. No license transfers, no co-ownership, no reference to Eli Langford or EcoShell Industries. My stomach turned. That meant Eli hadn't even bothered to file anything. He hadn't bought rights, hadn't asked for permission. He'd simply claimed my work as his. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen until my eyes burned. I replayed every moment between us. His easy laugh, the way he'd called me the real genius, the confidence that made me feel seen for the first time in years. Every word had been calculated, every compliment designed to soften me up. I dialed his number, straight to voicemail. Again, straight to voicemail. By the fifth call, I was shaking with fury. "Eli, we need to talk," I said into the receiver. "I looked up the patent. You'd better have an explanation." Nothing. At sunrise, I was already dressed and driving across town to the co-working space he'd bragged about. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. His company name, EcoShell Industries, was etched on frosted glass. It looked legitimate, impressive even. A young receptionist sat behind a desk, tapping nervously on a keyboard. "Is Eli Langford in?" I asked. She hesitated. He's not in today." "When will he be?" Another pause. She lowered her voice. "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but he's been telling people the patent's already his, that he bought it from some retired teacher." I felt the room tilt slightly. "I'm that teacher," I said. Her eyes widened. "Then he's lying. He told us you just helped him with funding." I took a deep breath. "Can I see what he's been working on?" She glanced toward the hallway, then opened a storage cabinet. "He said no outsiders, but I think you deserve to see." Inside were neat stacks of prototype containers, smooth biodegradable shells sealed with a faintly amber adhesive. I lifted one, held it to the light. The texture, the smell, the faint citrus note I'd added to mask organic acids. It was unmistakably mine. Heat crawled up my neck. My hands wanted to crush that sample into dust, but the rational part of me whispered, "Don't react. Prove it." I thanked her quietly and slipped one of the sealed jars into my bag. "If he asks," she said softly, "I didn't show you anything." Driving home, the anger inside me hardened into resolve. I wasn't just going to accuse him, I was going to document him. All afternoon, I turned my dining table into a forensic station. I photographed the sample from every angle, screenshotted our text messages, printed bank transfer receipts, and dated each file. Every promise he'd made, every lie he'd told, it all went into a binder labeled Evidence. EL. By midnight, I was still working, my coffee gone cold. That's when I thought of Dr. Simone Keller, my old colleague from the university. Simone was one of the sharpest chemists I knew. Precise, no nonsense, and impossible to fool. If anyone could prove whether Eli's adhesive matched mine, it was her. I called her first thing in the morning. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and curious. Clarice Whitmore, I haven't heard that name in ages. Simone, I need help, I said, my voice trembling just a little. Someone's using one of my old formulas, claiming it as their own. I need to know if it's chemically identical. She didn't hesitate. Bring me a sample. If it's yours, we'll prove it. Her certainty steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. After hanging up, I set the sample jar on my kitchen counter. Sunlight from the window caught the glue inside, turning it gold. I remembered the night I'd perfected that mixture, standing right here, surrounded by beakers and coffee cups, thinking it might change the world someday. Now it might still change the world, but only if I fought for it. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line across the top of the page. Step 1, prove ownership. Then I whispered to the empty room, You can keep the money, Eli. You'll never keep my name. That night, as I packed the jar and documents into a tote bag for Simone's lab, a strange calm came over me. I wasn't the helpless retiree he thought I was. I'd spent my life teaching students that truth always reveals itself under the right test conditions, and I was about to run that test. Simone's results could either confirm my suspicion or destroy my last bit of faith in myself. By the time I walked into Monica Reyes's office, I was running on coffee and anger. Monica was a patent attorney, recommended by Simone's husband, a sharp woman with dark glasses, an analytical voice, and the patience of a chess master. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything, the stolen formula, the investors, the money. When I finally stopped talking, she leaned back and said evenly, Clarice, what Eli did isn't just unethical, it's illegal. Since you hold the patent, any use of your formula without explicit consent or licensing is a direct violation. That means every product, every pitch, every investor agreement built on your adhesive is invalid. Her calm certainty hit me like oxygen after drowning. So I can stop him? Monica nodded. We can stop him and more. First, we'll hit pause on his operations, legally. Then we'll demand restitution. She drafted a cease and desist letter right there at her desk. The language was precise, powerful, every word designed to make Eli's entire startup freeze in place. Within hours, she filed a provisional injunction, requesting the court to temporarily halt any use or sale of my formula until ownership was verified. When the documents were sent out, she looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Now we wait for the panic. She wasn't exaggerating. 2 days later, Eli's investors began blowing up my inbox. The subject line said things like urgent, patent ownership inquiry, and immediate clarification requested. Apparently, once Monica's letter hit their desks, they realized their shiny eco-startup might be built on stolen property. The tone of their emails was polite but nervous, asking for confirmation of intellectual rights and proof of patent control. I replied carefully, using the exact template Monica had given me. Dear Mr. Langford, please find attached my registered patent documentation and a chronological record of all relevant correspondence and transactions. Sincerely, Clarice Whitmore, patent owner. Each message I sent felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. But then, one evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. Eli's name flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Clarice, what the hell did you do? He shouted before I could even speak. You've ruined everything. The investors are pulling out, the lawyers are calling, my accounts are frozen. I told you not to use my work without permission, I said quietly. You think this is just about you? He spat. You're destroying my future, my company, everything I've built. I almost laughed. You mean everything you stole? There was a long silence. Then he hissed, You'll regret this. I already do, I said, and hung up. When I told Monica about the call, she smirked. Good. Don't pick up again. Keep everything in writing. Angry men dig their own holes when they write instead of talk. The next morning, her prediction proved true. Eli's emails came flooding in, some pleading, some threatening. Each one went straight into my legal evidence folder. Then Monica took the next step. Clarice, we're not just going to shut him down. We're going to make him pay. We'll file a civil lawsuit demanding the return of your $76,000 investment, plus damages for unauthorized use and misrepresentation. She typed with quick precision, her manicured nails clacking against the keyboard. He built a business off your name and money. That's restitution territory. You'll get more than what you lost. A week later, we filed the official lawsuit, Whitmore versus Langford. It didn't take long for Eli to respond. His lawyer, a smug, overconfident man named Hastings, sent back a statement dripping with arrogance. Our client maintains that the product was a joint creation and that Ms. Whitmore's contribution was collaborative in nature, not proprietary. Monica read it, rolled her eyes, and said, Classic diversion. They're trying to blur ownership. He's claiming I helped him? I asked incredulously. He's claiming whatever might confuse the court long enough to stall. But here's the thing about liars, Clarice. They forget other people were watching. I frowned. What do you mean? She leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. Remember that investor meeting? The one where he presented your formula? There was a man who questioned him about the patent. Mr. Langford, I said immediately. The older investor, with the silver hair. Monica smiled faintly. Exactly, the one who smelled the inconsistency. If he confirms that Eli claimed sole ownership publicly, then this joint creation nonsense collapses. I felt a flicker of hope and fear mixed together. But what if he sides with Eli to protect his own investment? Monica shrugged. Then we'll expose him too. Investors hate losing money, but they hate being tied to fraud even more. Her confidence steadied me again, but as I walked out of her office that day, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. So much of this now rested on other people. People with money, influence, and motives I couldn't predict. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, reading over Eli's lawyer's statement one more time. Joint creation. It almost made me laugh. The only thing we'd ever created together was a lie. I looked at my patent framed on the wall, my name etched into the paper, a quiet reminder of what was real. If Eli wanted a chess match, then fine. But I was done being the pawn. Will that investor confirm my ownership or side with Eli to save his own investment? The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, right when I'd convinced myself that nothing else could surprise me. My phone buzzed, and the caller ID read Langford Industries. For a moment, I thought it was some spam listing. But when I picked up, a familiar voice said, Ms. Whitmore, this is Henry Langford. I was one of the investors at your cousin's presentation. My breath caught. Yes, of course, I said carefully. What can I do for you? He sighed. To be honest, Ms. Whitmore, I should have called you sooner. I had a feeling something wasn't right during that pitch. The way your cousin avoided answering questions about patent ownership, it stayed with me. There was a pause, as if he were choosing his words carefully. Could we meet? I'd like to understand what's really going on. We met the next morning at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where business deals are whispered over lattes. Mr. Langford was older than I'd remembered from the pitch. Mid-60s, dignified, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like a man who had built empires by reading people before contracts. He greeted me with a polite handshake. You have no idea how many sleepless nights that presentation caused me, he said as we sat down. My firm was preparing to invest heavily, but I couldn't shake the feeling that your cousin's story had holes. I reached into my bag and pulled out a binder. Inside were the documents Monica had helped me organize. The patent certificate, dated in my name, the adhesive test results from Simone's lab, and even photographs of my early prototypes, some still sitting on the same kitchen table where I'd mixed them years ago. Mr. Langford flipped through each page slowly. His expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief to something that looked like quiet anger. He told us, he said finally, that you were just his retired aunt, that you lent him some money to get started. He said the formula was his college project. I felt a strange mix of humiliation and vindication flood through me. My cheeks burned, but at the same time, I couldn't help feeling a grim satisfaction. The truth was finally standing in daylight. I wish I'd seen it then, he continued softly. But you have my attention now, Miss Whitmore, and my respect. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those words until they landed. He sat back, tapping a finger against his coffee cup. Eli built a house of cards. The investors will flee the moment we show them this. But you have something real here, a product with potential and integrity. He paused, then added, what if we invest directly in you instead? Relaunch your adhesive properly, under your name. A new company, small, ethical, science-led. You'd have full control. For a moment, I just stared at him, speechless. The offer felt surreal. After everything, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything, here was someone offering to build something new with me. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted. I don't even know if I can trust the process again. He smiled faintly. You don't have to trust people blindly anymore. You just have to trust your own worth. Something in his tone, steady, grounded, made me believe him. We spent hours discussing what a relaunch might look like. Small-scale production, eco-certifications, partnering with universities for sustainable packaging research. He promised to connect me with his in-house legal and marketing teams. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't just defending my past. I was building my future. Before we left, Mr. Langford asked if he could provide a written statement confirming what he'd witnessed during Eli's pitch. The misrepresentation, the unanswered patent questions, the false claims of ownership. It might strengthen your case, he said. I smiled. It would do more than that. It would prove I'm not crazy. He chuckled softly. You're not crazy, Ms. Whitmore. You're just surrounded by people who underestimated you. That afternoon, Monica called, her voice practically glowing through the phone. Clarice, you won't believe this. Langford just filed an official statement backing your ownership claim. This changes everything. By the end of the week, word had spread through the investor network. One by one, Eli's backers withdrew their funding. Without investment, EchoShell Industries began to crumble. The fancy office space, the glossy website, the confident image, everything started to fall apart. Late one night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Eli. Eli, you've destroyed everything. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. Me. You did that yourself. I didn't feel triumphant, just finished. I put my phone down, walked outside, and took a deep breath of the cold night air. For the first time in months, it felt clean. But Monica had warned me this wasn't over. He'll fight, she'd said. People like Eli don't admit defeat, they escalate. And sure enough, a week later, I got a court summons. Eli was contesting ownership again, claiming joint creation and shared intellectual contribution. As I read the document, the flicker of peace I'd felt disappeared, replaced by the old, simmering resolve. If he wanted a war in court, he was going to get one. But the court battle is only beginning, and Eli isn't done fighting. Courtrooms have a way of stripping people bare. No matter how polished you look walking in, the truth, or the lack of it, shows itself like a reflection in harsh light. The day of the hearing, I sat beside Monica in a room that felt colder than any lab I'd ever worked in. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Every shuffle of movement echoed against the marble walls. Across the aisle sat Eli, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The cocky grin was gone. His suit hung loose, his hair unkempt. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the stolen work, and the pity evaporated. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When he gave the signal to sit, my pulse thundered in my ears. Monica stood first, composed as ever. Your Honor, she began, this case concerns the unlawful use of a patented chemical formula owned by my client, Ms. Clarice Whitmore. The defendant, Mr. Eli Langford, presented this formula as his own and secured financial commitments based on false claims of ownership. She walked to the evidence table and laid out a series of documents with surgical precision. My patent registration, the chemical analysis from Simone's lab, the email threads, and proof of the $76,000 transfer. Each piece clicked into place like a tile in a mosaic of betrayal. Then came the defense. Eli's lawyer, Mr. Hastings, stood up, all smug confidence and expensive cologne. Your Honor, my client maintains that Ms. Whitmore willingly contributed both her formula and funds as part of a joint effort. The plaintiff's actions demonstrate consent, and her financial investment serves as proof that she understood the project was collaborative. Monica didn't even flinch. Consent, she said calmly, requires clarity, not manipulation. The judge leaned back, glancing over the stack of evidence. Let's hear from the witnesses. Monica called Mr. Langford, the investor first. His testimony was sharp and professional. He described Eli's presentation, the evasive responses, and how my patent number had been displayed on slides under Eli's name. When I asked about ownership, he told the court, Mr. Langford claimed sole creation. He never mentioned Ms. Whitmore or her patent. The judge nodded slowly. Then Monica reached into her briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. Your Honor, she said, we'd like to play an audio recording from that same investor meeting. The courtroom filled with the familiar hum of a microphone and Eli's recorded voice booming through the speakers. This is my proprietary adhesive technology, developed personally over the past year, he said on the recording. Hearing those words again made my stomach twist. But this time, they weren't haunting. They were damning. When the clip ended, the judge's brow furrowed. Mr. Langford, is that your voice? Eli shifted in his seat. It sounds like me, yes. Monica spoke smoothly. And the claim you made, was it true? He hesitated. It was partially true. The judge raised an eyebrow. Partially? Eli stammered. I had help, yes. But the idea was mine. Clarice's formula was inspiration. Inspiration? Monica repeated, her tone razor-sharp. Or theft? Before Eli could answer, the judge motioned for me to take the stand. My heart raced as I walked to the witness chair. The oath felt heavy, but I spoke it clearly. Monica began, Ms. Whitmore, can you explain, in your own words, how your cousin came into possession of your formula? I told the story, the calls, the promises, the way he'd flattered me into trusting him. I described how he'd used my work, erased my name, and twisted the truth. My voice trembled only once when I said, he didn't just take my formula, he took my faith and family. Monica's expression softened for a second. Then she nodded. No further questions. The defense attorney approached, pretending to be sympathetic. Ms. Whitmore, you're a retired teacher, correct? Yes. And you willingly transferred $76,000 to my client? I did. So you chose to participate financially in this venture. I chose to trust him, I replied. That's not the same as consent. He smirked, ready to twist my words, but the judge cut him off. Move on, counselor. Finally, Eli took the stand. He tried to sound composed, talking about family collaboration and mutual ambition, but the more he spoke, the less convincing he became. His charm cracked under the pressure. Monica stood for cross-examination. Mr. Langford, can you explain what you meant earlier when you said the idea was yours? Eli swallowed. I meant it was my idea to use her formula. To use her formula? Monica pressed. He nodded, oblivious to what he'd just admitted. Yes, exactly. It was my idea to use her formula, not hers to give. The room fell silent. Even the judge froze mid-note. Monica didn't say a word. She simply turned to the judge, letting that confession hang in the air. The judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Mr. Langford, you just admitted to using a patented formula without consent. That's infringement. There's nothing else to discuss. His gavel came down with a single, decisive thud. Judgment for the plaintiff. Ms. Whitmore retains full ownership of the patent and is awarded damages in the amount of $98,000. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then Monica touched my arm lightly, smiling. You won, Clarice. Across the room, Eli stood, his face red, his jaw tight. You'll regret this, Clarice, he shouted, voice cracking with rage. The bailiff stepped forward, but Eli stormed out before anyone could stop him. The heavy doors slammed behind him, echoing like punctuation. I sat there, finally, breathing. For the first time in months, the air didn't taste like fear. It tasted like freedom. Justice is served, but revenge, I realized, has a deeper flavor when it's built on dignity. Winning in court didn't feel like victory. It felt like breathing after nearly drowning. For months, my life had been consumed by defense, defending my name, my work, my truth. Now, for the first time, I could finally build instead of fight. Henry Langford kept his promise. A week after the verdict, he invited me to his office, an elegant, glass-walled space overlooking the city skyline. He poured us coffee and said, "Clarice, you've proven something most people never do. That integrity still has value in business. Let's find investors who believe in that." True to his word, he introduced me to a network of ethical investors, people who actually listened when I spoke. Not once did I have to prove that I knew my own science. They believed in me, in my vision of sustainable innovation led by women who had too often been sidelined. We formed a small company, Clarice Tech Innovations. The name felt surreal when I saw it printed on the first set of stationery. My name, not hidden behind someone else's ambition. Our focus was simple: produce eco-friendly adhesives and packaging materials using my patented formula, while developing new compounds that could change the way industries approach sustainability. The first few months were grueling. Starting from scratch meant endless paperwork, supply chain headaches, and sleepless nights revising production plans. I learned quickly that building a business demanded more than ideas. It required resilience, humility, and trust in the right people. Trust. That word still felt fragile. Hiring was the hardest part. I didn't want charm or charisma anymore. I wanted competence, honesty, and heart. My first hire was Lydia, a single mother with a background in industrial chemistry. Then came Carlos, a quiet logistics expert who had once managed waste reduction programs for a nonprofit. Together, we became a small, scrappy team, 6 people working out of a converted warehouse that smelled faintly of resin and ambition. And, of course, Simone. When I asked her to join as head of research, she laughed. "You mean I get to turn your garage experiments into global science? Count me in." Her steady presence grounded me. It felt poetic. The same woman who had helped expose Eli's deceit was now helping me build something honest. Monica, ever the strategist, joined the advisory board, handling legal frameworks and teaching me the kind of caution I'd once lacked. "Never sign anything," she'd remind me with a wink, without reading it twice and sleeping on it once. The first big order came from a regional paper manufacturer looking to replace synthetic glue. It wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it was real. When the first batch shipped out, we all stood around the loading dock, cheering like children. That moment, not the court victory, not the settlement check, was when I finally felt free. As Clarice Tech grew, word spread. Reporters called. Sustainability blogs featured our work. Soon I began receiving messages from women inventors across the country, teachers, engineers, retired scientists who had their own Eli stories. One woman wrote, "You made me brave enough to file my patent again." Another said, "I thought I was too old to start over, but your story changed that." Reading their words filled me with something Eli could never counterfeit: purpose. I started mentoring part-time, offering free workshops about intellectual property and ethical entrepreneurship. "Protect your ideas," I'd tell every group of women I met, "because if you don't, someone else will claim them, and they'll do it with your own confidence." Meanwhile, Eli tried to reappear. I heard through the grapevine that he'd attempted to start another venture, some vague tech sustainability project, but his reputation was poisoned now. Investors wouldn't touch him. His name had become shorthand for betrayal in small business circles. Then, months later, I heard he'd left the country altogether. Someone said he was in Thailand, another claimed Costa Rica. The details didn't matter. What struck me was that even in leaving, he blamed everyone but himself. Family sabotage, he called it, according to one rumor. Once upon a time, that would have stung. But now, I felt nothing but quiet closure. He could rewrite the story however he wanted. The truth was already written in court documents and on every patent record. The day we received our first industry award for innovation in sustainable materials, I stood on stage in front of a modest crowd. The lights were warm, the applause gentle. As I looked down at the plaque, I realized something profound. I hadn't just reclaimed my formula, I'd reclaimed my identity. Our product labels now bore the small black and gold Clarice Tech seal. Underneath, in clean lettering, it read, Patent Owner, Clarice Whitmore. Every time I saw it printed, I thought about the long nights at my kitchen table, the panic, the betrayal, and how all of it had become fuel. I wasn't driven by revenge anymore. I was driven by redemption. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the glass walls of my office, a 58-year-old woman who had lost everything and rebuilt it with precision and grace. The kind of woman I used to admire in others, never imagining I'd become one myself. Business grew steadily, the team expanded. The laughter returned to my days. For the first time in years, I felt whole. But peace, I've learned, has a way of being tested. Because one evening, just as I was locking up the office, the receptionist hurried over. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, her eyes uncertain. "There's someone here asking for you." I turned and froze. Standing in the doorway, thinner, older, and carrying something in his hands, was Eli. But one unexpected visitor will test whether I've truly forgiven him. It was late on a Thursday evening when I heard the knock. The office was quiet, the kind of stillness that hums after a long day of work. The last of my staff had gone home hours ago. I was gathering my things, ready to drive back to the cottage I'd finally built with the money Eli once borrowed. At first I thought the sound was the wind rattling the glass doors, but then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I turned toward the entrance. The security lights flickered on, casting a pale glow over the hallway. And there, framed in the doorway, stood Eli. He looked nothing like the man I'd last seen in court. His once styled hair hung limp, his skin sallow and drawn tight around his face. His clothes were wrinkled, a size too big, like he'd lost weight too fast, but the eyes, the same deep hazel eyes that used to charm investors and family alike, now carried something different. Not arrogance, not even pride, just emptiness. "Clarice," he said softly, "please don't shut the door." I didn't move. I simply stood there, waiting. I didn't know where else to go," he stammered. "I've lost everything. The company, the apartment. Everyone's turned their back on me." I stayed silent, watching him struggle to piece together whatever story he'd come to tell. "I'm not here to ask for money," he added quickly, as if he knew that would be my first thought. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I really am." The words fell clumsily from his mouth, almost fragile, as though they might shatter before they reached me. He took a shaky breath. "I got lost, Clarice. I thought I could be someone important, someone people respected. But I wasn't smart enough to build it myself, and I used you to get there. I know that now. I destroyed everything because I couldn't admit you were the real genius." For the first time in months, I saw tears glint in his eyes. He looked down at the floor, ashamed. "You have every right to hate me," he whispered. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest loosening. "I don't hate you, Eli," I said quietly. "I did for a while, but hate's heavy. It doesn't fix anything." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I was wondering if—" He hesitated, voice trembling. "If maybe I could work with you again. Not in management, not even as a partner. Just in research. I can help in the lab. You know I can." I stared at him for a long moment. The request hung in the air like a ghost of our past. Part of me wanted to laugh, not cruelly, but at the sheer irony of it. After all the destruction, he wanted to come back to the very place he'd tried to steal. I finally said, "Eli, look at me." He lifted his head, his eyes wet and desperate. "I forgive you," I said, my voice steady. "Truly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trust. You broke something that doesn't rebuild just because you're sorry." He blinked, speechless. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope I'd prepared earlier that day. I hadn't known why I'd brought it with me. Maybe intuition, maybe closure. I handed it to him. He frowned, confused, then opened it. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a handwritten note. He read the words aloud under his breath. "Start over honestly." He looked up at me, his mouth trembling. "Clarice, I can't take this." "Yes, you can," I said. "It's not a gift, it's a clean slate. You can use it to get back on your feet, or you can waste it. That's your choice. But don't ever say no one gave you a second chance. He stared at the paper like it was something foreign, something he didn't deserve to hold. For a second, I saw the boy I used to know, the charming, wide-eyed dreamer who believed he could build something great. But then I also saw the man who'd lied, stolen, and justified it every step of the way. "Thank you," he whispered, voice cracking. "You're a better person than I ever was." He turned to leave. I watched as he walked down the hallway, his shoulders hunched, his steps uncertain. When the door finally clicked shut behind him, the silence that followed was soft, not empty. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vengeance. I just felt peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've closed a chapter completely. I walked back into my office, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment at the window. The city shimmered in the distance, bright, restless, alive. Somewhere out there, maybe Eli would find his own kind of redemption. Maybe not. That wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I smiled faintly and whispered to myself, "It's over." As I gathered my things and headed out, I thought about how much had changed. I'd lost money, time, and trust, but I'd gained something far greater, myself. Betrayal, I realized, had taught me more about strength than success ever could. It stripped me down to what was essential and rebuilt me stronger, sharper, and truer. My story didn't end in revenge, it ended in restoration, because the best revenge isn't shouting or winning, it's owning your name, your work, and your peace so completely that no one can take them from you again. And for the first time in years, I stepped out into the night, free. In the end, I didn't win because Eli lost. I won because I found myself again. Sometimes life doesn't hand you justice. You have to build it with your own hands. And when you finally do, peace feels louder than revenge. If you were in my place, would you forgive someone who stole your dreams, or would you walk away for good? Tell me in the comments what your heart says. And if my story made you feel something, share it. Someone out there might need this reminder too.